This happened around 2006 when I was 11 years old. My cousin Aaron was spending the week with my sister and I over summer vacation. At some point during the week, my mom decided to take us all to McDonald's. We ordered and took our food to the back of the McDonald's to sit at a table connected to one of those super long booths along the wall nearest to the bathrooms. Sitting on the same booth, but a few tables down, was an older man sitting by himself. He was probably in his 60s, a bit overweight, balding, and had huge lens 80s style glasses on. He was wearing a dirty t-shirt with gray sweatpants. When we first walked in, I noticed him, but he kept his head down and didn't seem to pay any attention to us, so I kind of blew him off and almost forgot that he was there. My mom had my brother in his car seat by the table and was feeding him french fries. He must have either choked or got sick because he started throwing up all over the place. My mom grabbed him and rushed into the bathroom with him, followed by my sister to help. Aaron and I were left alone at the table. All of a sudden, the old dude looks over at us and starts trying to have a conversation with us. It started with the casual, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And then he said something about hoping my brother was okay. So we politely responded, thinking that's all that he wanted to say. But then he immediately started getting weird. He asked our ages, which we told him. And then he started asking our names and where our moms worked. So, being kids, we told him that also. The man then looked down at his phone and said that our mom had just texted him saying they would be a while in the bathroom and that he was supposed to bring us home because it was getting late. Although I knew my mom had never even talked to this man once. So, even as a kid, I knew something was off. The man then grabbed our hands and said we should hurry. At this point, we were practically being dragged outside. We got outside, and this man started leading us into an old, run-down white van. He opened the back door and said that we could stay in there for the ride. Luckily, just then, some younger guy had spotted us and instantly went over and told the manager what was going on. As this was happening, my mom and my sister also came out of the bathroom, saw what was going on, and screamed while running outside to us. At this point, we hadn't gotten in the van yet, but the man was trying to push us in. Now hearing my mom's screams, I instantly started pushing back, trying to keep myself from entering. The guy quickly gives up as the manager and my mother are fast approaching. The guy gets in the driver's seat and steps on it with his back door still open. My mom was still yelling at us, and we started crying. We didn't know what to think. To this day, this experience still horrifies me. I don't know why me and my cousin were stupid enough to go along with what this guy was saying, but I'm just glad my mom showed up when she did. My first job was at McDonald's. This building was attached to a gas station and located off of a busy highway. I was 16 and started a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. This early, the store was usually empty, so only 3 people, myself included, were in the restaurant. These people were my manager, who was in the back, the cook, who was also in the back, and myself, the cashier, who was up front. I was wiping down the counter when a man who looked to be in his mid-30s or early 40s came in. He didn't order anything, but went straight to the restrooms, which were in the restaurant area just around the corner from my cash register. Many truckers and travelers would come in simply to use the washrooms and leave, so this was not an uncommon occurrence. I didn't think much of it, but after the man finished, he came up to the counter and said, "Excuse me, I just used the washroom, and one of the toilets is overflowing." I immediately came around the counter and let him lead me towards the restrooms. Suddenly, I got a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach and stopped dead in my tracks. I became very aware that no one was in the restaurant area, and the only other 2 people in the store were in the back and wouldn't be able to hear me if I went into the restroom. I felt this overwhelming sense of being lured in. The man had the restroom door open and realized I had paused. He said, "Come on in, I'll show you," which came off innocently enough, but it didn't sit well with me. I smiled and said, "I'll get my manager," and I started making my way back to the counter. "It'll only take a minute," he called out. I met my manager in the back and explained to him that a man was complaining about an overflowing toilet. My manager went to check it out, and I followed closely behind him. When we turned the corner, the man was gone, and we entered the restroom. no toilet was overflowing. We exchanged a look and never brought it up again. As we were leaving the washroom, I glanced into the parking lot and I saw a car driving away. It was the man. He gave me a terrifying death stare as I drove off. To this day, I don't know what gave me that feeling to not follow the man into the restroom, but I'm glad I stopped to think about what I was doing. The whole situation only lasted a few seconds, but it felt like forever. I was young and trusting, and this man could have done who knows what, and I wouldn't have been hurt. He could have left, got away with whatever it was he had planned, and hit the highway. I got out of work at 6:30 p.m. and went to McDonald's to get an iced coffee. I pulled up to the drive-thru and there was a red truck in front of me with no cap on the bed. It's super wide, so I can't see the mirrors and thus can't get a glimpse of who is inside. I'm minding my own business when I noticed that the red truck had pulled up to the second pickup window. I didn't think anything of it and just assumed they had a big order and the McDonald's employees asked them to pull up so I could get my iced coffee from the first window. That's when I look up and I see the truck's reverse lights come on. Okay, they must have pulled a little too far and are backing up a little. No big deal. They keep backing up without signaling at all to me. I slowly back up too. Luckily, there was no one behind me. They keep going until they're finally at the first pickup window. The McDonald's employee looks out the window at me, shrugs, and gives me a look like they were just as confused as me. A few minutes goes by. At this point, I'm just thinking about how strange and not a part of common etiquette it was to back up without signaling to anyone that you needed to do so. They could have easily hit me had I not been looking straight ahead. Now, about another 5 minutes goes by. No one is being given any food. I just wanted my iced coffee, and I'm starting to get a little annoyed that they backed up, thinking maybe they were told to go to the second window since I only needed the coffee, but they suddenly felt like refusing to do so would get McDonald's to get them their food faster, and thus they backed up to the first window. I honestly don't know. Anyways, I continue to sit there and wait for my food when I see the driver's side door to the truck open. Out comes a man, like 30 or 40 years old. He was wearing light khaki-colored overalls and a dirty white shirt. He starts walking slowly over to my car. I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's just gonna apologize to me for not signaling when he needed to back up. He gets to my passenger door window, turns so he's facing the window head-on, and just stares at me. I'm waiting for him to signal to put my window down, thinking he had something to say, but he doesn't do anything. He just stands there and stares. That's when he starts to lift his hand to the door handle. I quickly lock the door. He immediately starts screaming and continues to attempt to open my now locked door. Not like an angry scream, more like a mentally unstable scream. The guy then goes from trying to open my door to attempting to break my window with his elbow. At this point, I want to drive away, but there was now a car behind me waiting in the drive-thru. I'm too close to both the cars in front of me and the car behind me to be able to drive off. Thinking quickly, I turn off my car, take the keys, and run inside the McDonald's in hopes he doesn't follow me. All the McDonald's employees saw this going down, and when they saw me running inside, they let me hide in the back until the man just leaves. The guy then proceeds to check all the cars in the parking lot to see if they were locked. We instantly call the police, and they were able to detain the guy. It turns out, the guy recently escaped from a mental hospital nearby and stole the car he was driving. The guy was carrying 3 different knives with him when the police detained him. Overall, this experience still scares me to this day. I'm just glad I was able to react fast enough to lock my door before he could open it and do who knows what.
I witnessed someone end their life at McDonald's. It happened a couple of years ago and I don't really like to think about it too much. I thought sharing my story with people online would make it a little easier, so here it is. This is kind of my attempt to make peace with the situation, and I hope that the soul of this poor man is resting in peace. I don't remember a lot of the details, it all seems really fuzzy, like it was all just a bad dream that never should have happened. I do remember some stuff though. I remember it was raining. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. I remember that I had just finished working overtime, so it was pretty late. I wanted to grab a quick bite to eat, but didn't feel like eating in my car. I always hate doing that, especially because of the smell, so I went in. I got a Big Mac from McDonald's. I was sitting in the corner of the store when I noticed a really tall man walk inside. He was dressed in standard winter clothes and had a long blue hat on. There was a lot of empty space inside of the hat on top of his head, and I don't remember exactly why it caught my attention. I watched him for a few minutes. I wasn't particularly interested. I was just sitting there eating and didn't really have anything else to look at. My phone was dead, and he was the only other customer in the McDonald's at the time. His body language stood out to me, though. I could tell that he was not in a good frame of mind. I mean, looking at this guy for a minute told you everything you needed to know about him. He was suffering and in a lot of pain. I'm not sure exactly what kind of pain. I could only make guesses. Maybe his wife had left him. Maybe his kids died. I'll never know what happened to him. All I will ever know is that it was bad enough to push him to the very edge, and enough to make him jump off. He stood in front of the cashier for a few minutes while he appeared to be looking at the menu. To this day, I don't know if he was actually considering ordering anything or if he was just waiting for the right moment to. So this was the layout of the store. On one side of the McDonald's, there was the counter where people could order their food, but the counter area didn't take up the entire wall. There was a separation between that and a small hallway that brought you to the bathrooms. I was on the other side of the McDonald's looking on. He had been standing there for a few minutes when he randomly decided to start walking down the hallway. He moved really slowly, like he was really trying to take his time. Step by step, he came closer and closer to death. And the weirdest part about the whole situation was that he didn't seem sad. Didn't feel like he was depressed. It was more of an apathy, like he had suffered so much that he just didn't care anymore, couldn't bring himself to bother with being alive. I don't know, maybe I just feel that way after having thought about this experience so much over the last few years. As he continued down the hallway, he got slower with each step, finally coming to a halt in front of the men's bathroom. He stood there for about 45 seconds. I'm not sure what he was planning on doing. My first reaction was that there was some kind of sign in front of the men's bathroom that it was closed, but that wasn't the case. I saw him pull something out of his coat pocket. He very slowly pointed it at his head. It was a pistol. It wasn't until I heard the gunshot that it registered what was happening. I saw blood go all over the place. His body fell to the floor with a thud. I screamed. I didn't know what else to do. I remember vomiting everything I had just eaten on what was left of my meal. If I hadn't been so disturbed, I would probably have been extremely grossed out, but I was in an absolute state of shock. I started speaking with one of the employees after a few minutes had gone by. He screamed what had happened. I told him that he pulled a gun out of his pocket and shot himself with it. One of the employees there was convinced that he had been shot by someone else, strongly hinting that it was me. I didn't quite understand why they thought so. Some disgruntled old woman, she was old, and told the police that she didn't think that the guy ended his own life. Whatever her motivation was, it really didn't matter. The police didn't take her very seriously from the start, and this obviously was done by his own doing. The security tapes proved as much. I'm not going to lie. It really bothered me that she had to make an already bad situation worse. I already answered some of the questions from the police officers about the story. I remember driving home that night. I remember how alone I felt. This had really taken a toll on me. I pray for that guy's soul every day. I really hope he's in a better place. I can't imagine how horrible things must have been for him that he would have offed himself in a public place like that. I haven't eaten out since this whole experience. I have the strange fear that I'm going to witness another one in public like that. I know it's not rational, but I definitely feel that way. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why this happened, and I probably never will.
There are two types of people who work at McDonald's, or fast food places in general. There are ambitious, intelligent people who are trying to work hard to achieve a goal, in the hopes that one day they'll be able to quit for the sake of something better. And then there are the losers, those with no ambition who have given up and have no desire to achieve anything other than a weekly paycheck. I like to consider myself in the first category, as I was working hard to afford my apartment while taking classes at the local community college. I normally work the later shifts at the drive-thru window, which is the one spot most employees hated working the most. You constantly have to deal with extremely impatient, oftentimes very rude people who are on their phones or have music blaring, and oftentimes don't realize that I wasn't the individual who took their order, so it's not my fault if it's wrong. In addition to that, you're pretty much constantly on your feet and exposed to the elements. No matter how cold, windy, or rainy it is, you have to keep leaning out into it, wishing that you were in a warm car about to drive away from this place. My point being is, please try to be more kind and patient with the drive-thru people. Yeah, some are lazy, but most are trying their best, and even though you only see them for about half a minute, a kind remark or a warm smile might make their day. Anyways, now that I've gotten that off my chest, I work the late shift with two people who I believe qualify for the second category of employees. Connie was a high school dropout who was almost always late and was never invested in what she was doing, and Harold was a deadbeat who often smelled like weed and only kept the job because otherwise his parents would throw him out of the house. He was 32 years old. So one night I was there after 11 p.m. by the drive-thru window on an extremely cold January night, flipping through the pages of my class notes and trying to keep warm by the fry machine. Connie was mopping while looking at her phone, and Harold was in the back probably getting baked in the walk-in cooler. That late at night we rarely got customers, and if we did, they were almost always zonked out college kids who used the drive-thru but never physically walked into the restaurant. I stood up and stretched my legs and told Connie that I was heading to the bathroom. It was around 11:30 at this point. I came back less than 5 minutes later, with Connie more or less in the same spot that she was before. I walked past her and turned the corner to return to the window, and froze dead in my tracks. There was a bald man in white face makeup and a black hoodie standing directly outside the window staring in. His eyes were wide, with a blank expression that read, "What kind of trouble can I create?" The figure made direct eye contact with me and smirked, and slammed his palm against the window. I had no idea what to do, and inside my head, the words, clown, mime, psychopath, danger, and death all exploded like fireworks. The window was already shut and locked to protect myself from the cold, but the doors were all unlocked, and this person could easily walk right in and grab any one of us if he wanted to. In my head, I kept referring to it as he, but honestly, I had no idea what the gender was. The outfit and makeup made the stranger look androgynous. Maybe that was the point. The figure slapped on the glass window again with its hand. "Open," drawing out the word like a snake. Now, even if the figure wasn't dressed like that, I was under no obligation to open the window. It's unlawful to serve walk-ups at the drive-thru window, certainly for their safety, but also for ours. I shook my head and backed away. I called over my shoulder, "Lock the doors." The whole time, this figure didn't break eye contact with me, and to the best of my memory, I don't even remember it blinking. It drew back its lips in a sinister smile, and I shit you not, its gums were black. I don't mean I was too far away that I couldn't see clearly. I mean its gums were as black as licorice. "Open," it hissed again, louder this time. Its other hand slammed against the window, and it licked its lips with its tongue. "Open." That's when a third hand slammed itself into the window. A left hand, and it was just as pale and as skeletal as the other two. I lost my shit. "Holy shit! Call the cops!" I screamed, and ran back into the office, which was the only room with a locking door and no windows. I heard Connie scream, "What the fuck?" And she dropped her mop and flew across the room and made for the back with me. All the yelling attracted Harold, and I shoved past him into the office and told him to look at the security camera. Sure enough, the white-faced creeper looked to have 3 hands on the window and was tilting its head back and forth, perhaps trying to discover where I ran off to. We locked the office door and called the cops, explaining to the operator that there was at least 2 prowlers outside acting in a threatening manner towards us. I kind of expected it to be over after I called the cops. If it was a prank, they would run once they realized they scared me enough to call 911. But it didn't end there. We watched as the figure left the drive-thru window, circled the building, and made for the restaurant door. "Is there a second one? Look for a second one," I panicked while still on the phone with the operator. Connie was freaking out, and Harold was muttering something about not getting the police involved, likely because he was carrying weed. That's when the power went out. Everything. Cameras, lights, phone, the whole building went down. And barely 10 seconds after we all quieted down after shouting at each other in the dark, we heard footsteps in the dining room area. "Connie, did you lock the doors?" I whispered. She didn't reply. I think she had her hand pressed over her mouth.
"Open."
We heard a voice call from outside the room in the dark.
"Open."
The shout came at least 3 more times, circling from the kitchen to right off the hallway where we were hiding. I was convinced I was about to die, and every decision I had made in my life that brought me there was flashing before my eyes. We heard footsteps pass the office. After another few minutes, we heard the wail of police sirens outside, and at any moment, we expected to hear gunfire and the police shouting at someone to get on the ground, but we never did. We waited until the police identified themselves, and opened the door and ran out into the parking lot. Since the power was down, we couldn't show the cops the security footage, so we just told them what we saw. They swept the whole building and said it was clear. The owner of that particular franchise store showed up about an hour later, after Harold and Connie had left. I waited for the power to be restored, so an officer could escort me back inside to collect my belongings. The next day my manager called me and asked me to work the night shift. I asked him if the creep from last night had been caught. When he said, "There was no creep," I told him I quit and hung up the phone. This story is completely true. I have no idea what caused the power outage, which apparently erased all the security footage from the day. Without proof on video, my manager and the cops concluded that it was an elaborate prank, but that third hand still bothers me to this day, even more so than its hungry, inhuman eyes. Sure, it could have been a prank, but I wish someone would just confirm that for me, so I can sleep again. Keep your windows locked at night, and if you hear someone tapping from behind the curtains, don't open them. A couple of years ago, I worked at a McDonald's in Kansas. It was a location with a large outdoor play place for the kids. In all honesty, if it wasn't for that thing, I probably would have kept my job much longer. Part of my responsibilities included maintaining the cleanliness and safety of the big, colorful, large, intestine-looking pyramid of tubes and slides. It goes without saying that kids are messy, and whenever one had a bathroom-related accident or there was an injury, I had to go clean and sterilize the thing the best I could. I'm a relatively small person, so I was able to access most of the spots in the play place just fine, and because of that, I knew the maze-like structure very well. It's ironic that I went to school to design skyscrapers, and the closest I ever got to that was becoming an expert with the inner workings of a McDonald's child trap. One night after work, my friend Nate and I decided to hang out and have a smoke before we drove home. The play place was closed even though the restaurant was still open. But instead of sitting in our cars, we unlocked the gate and wandered into the enclosure where the mini playground was, locking the gate behind us. Technically, we probably shouldn't have been doing that, but I felt given how much time and sweat I sacrificed to this thing, I had earned the relative privacy it could provide me. I sat at the base of one of the large tube slides and lit my cigarette, while Nate sat on a bench directly across from me. We had been talking for about 10 minutes. I shifted my weight in preparation to stand up, when from within the slide, something grabbed me hard on the shoulder. What felt like a large hand grabbed my left shoulder, tight enough to make my joints pop, and I felt an index finger and thumb brush the skin of my neck. I screamed and launched myself up and sprinted to the exit, pulling at the door frantically before remembering that it was locked and I had the key. As Nate assaulted me with questions about what just happened, I tried to catch my breath and stared back at the slide, waiting for a fellow coworker to emerge and laugh, having played a great practical joke on me, but nothing happened. I didn't hear a thing from within the structure. I unlocked the gate, walked out, and slammed it shut, and locked it again. I ran back into the restaurant, and immediately went to the back office to check the security video. The entrance and the spot where I had been sitting was monitored, as were two other angles that showed the majority of the small gated area, but there was still about a third of the structure that we couldn't see. After about 5 minutes of watching the monitors closely, I called a friend of mine who was a cop. He drove in about 15 minutes later, and together we walked back into the Playplace area, armed with flashlights and mace. We examined the entire structure. Not only was there no one there, but there were no signs that anyone had been hiding inside or had broken in. I was at a complete loss for words and feeling very foolish, but I knew with certainty that I had been grabbed. I barely slept that night, and the following morning I came in early to review the entire tape from the previous night. Not once did anyone emerge from the slide or the gate. Before we opened the place to the kids again, myself and the biggest coworker I had went through the whole thing again, but again, there was nothing found. The Playplace is completely enclosed within a fenced-in area, with only one gate leading in or out. The fence is around 8 feet high, not impossible to climb, but it would be extremely difficult. To this day, I'm still at a loss to explain what happened. Some people I tell this to are convinced I experienced something paranormal and that the Playplace is haunted. Others think I'm the victim of an extremely well thought out practical joke. At this point, I wouldn't even be angry to discover that. I'm just desperate to learn how it was done. I quit the job about 4 or 5 months after the incident. What bothers me the most is that if there was a living, breathing person there, they would have had to silently prop themselves up in that slide, fighting gravity, barely making a sound or breathing for me to have missed them, and then after they grabbed me, climbed back up the tunnel without making a sound. I didn't hear a whisper of movement behind me, or even feel the faintest hint of breath on the back of my neck. I really hope one day to discover the truth behind what happened, and why.